Welcome, everyone, to episode 49 of the Single Malt Strategy Podcast. I am your host, Jean, the Strategy Wargamer, and with me today are my co-hosts, Eric, Tortuga Power, and Matt, the Historical Gamer. Welcome back, guys. How you guys doing in this brand new year? This is where you say stuff.
That good. We're doing amazing. I'm doing great. It's always this awkward thing, the three-wheel, where it's like, who goes, if somebody asks a question? I think, honestly, Jean, I think you just gotta point a finger at someone.
Not the middle finger, though.
Yes, and we have a special episode for you guys today. We're a little late. I know this shit's supposed to go out before the beginning of the year, but we're going to be doing the top games of 2019, and we're going to be counting off the top 3 games each of us think made the top charts in 2019. So I am going to point my big middle finger at Tortuga Power here.
Oh gosh, is it me already? Okay, so I'm not going to go through like every game of 2019. I feel like we're just doing like our top 3 games, right?
Yeah, we're just doing top 3. So this will be the third.
Okay, so I mean it'll be a little bit anticlimactic if somebody else's number 1 is taken up by someone else's 2 or 3, but my number 3 for 2019 is, drumroll please. Thank you. Field of Glory Empires.
How did I knew that shit was gonna? I knew that was gonna be in your top 3.
Yeah, I think.
Can we boo someone else's list?
You guys are upset with Field of Glory Empires?
Oh, I know whose list he's gonna be booing.
I don't want to spoil the punch, but this was in direct opposition to what I'm sure is in John's 2019 top 3 list. But anyway, I think Field of Glory Empires. Look at that time frame. Doing those historical type games like Imperator Rome, all those games set in the ancient, it's like the Rome Total War type stuff. I feel like Field of Glory Empires. I mean, there's not a ton of games in 2019 to pick from to begin with, but I feel like Field of Glory Empires did that scenario correctly, and it was enough. I played it enough. I got enough enjoyment out of it that I found it to be one of my top 3 games from 2019.
Oh, before we jump, I wonder what was the specific thing? Like, what is the key thing that kind of won you over on that game? Like mechanic wise or anything?
Okay, let's see. Well, I really enjoy the turn-based. I enjoy the Rome Total War type environment for the historical games, like the classical type games. I think it fits well because not a whole lot is happening in an amount of time. So I don't think you need to go day by day or anything like that. I think it's an appropriate jump of time. It's having those turns, kind of repeating myself. Combat, okay, so obviously the link to Field of Glory 2, being able to execute the combat if you want. Just that's an option. Obviously it's not part of the base game. You have to own Field of Glory 2, but I enjoy Field of Glory 2 as well, so it's fun to bring those in. And I feel like the historicity, if I can make up a word, the ability of a game to like follow history. I think that's important to me. And Field of Glory Empires, it does remain close to history. It's such a tricky balance to build in an AI, which should just be trying to do its best at all times, but also when that happens, the balance of the game evolves in a manner that's believable or similar to history. That's a tricky balance, and I feel like Field of Glory Empires has achieved that balance, that you see things progress. You see Rome start blobbing bigger and bigger. You see Macedonia get bigger. You see Rome fight Macedonia. Rome usually beats Macedonia. You see Carthage and Rome. I mean, a lot of the historical way that things played out happen, and they're not scripted. It's all just built into the modifiers of these nations, that some of them are supposed to be stronger, and like so the balance is, they've obviously put in a lot amount of time into it. So
how many hours are you on so far?
How many hours have I played on it?
Yeah, last time you checked.
I don't know. I'm gonna guess maybe 150.
Holy shit. Wow. All right.
Is that a lot or a little? I better check the game now. It might be a lot less than that.
If you're at 3 digits, man, that's that's impressive.
Well, the problem is Steam is not really. No, my playtime is only 54 hours, so that's a lot less.
Oh, only. Jeez.
Yeah, but I think my playtime on games is so I can't really figure out how much time I've played in the game, even if Steam tells you, because it's distorted. Sometimes I'll leave the game running for, a couple hours. Okay, enough. That's number 3. I don't want to spend a lot of time on number 3.
I should do that to boost my numbers. Go to work at 8 o'clock in the morning, turn on Steam, and then just fucking come back and forth. Like, yeah, man, I played for a while.
I've done that before, where you just leave a game running overnight. You're like, I'll play it when I wake up.
I haven't done that yet, but maybe I did in years. But let's go on to Matt. What's your number 3 top game of 2019?
My number 3 game on the list is a game that I wouldn't be surprised if Tortuga has in here, but I'm not sure if he does or not. And that is a game called A Legionary's Life,
nice.
Which is a really interesting project that's done by, I think, one guy. It's a sort of an RPG storytelling game. It's almost like it almost harks back to sort of the old text-based adventure type games of the 80s and 90s, although it does have some element of graphics and interface. But really, it's telling the story of an individual Roman soldier during the Second Punic War, and it has permadeath. And so you basically are you start out essentially with the equivalent of a Roman private as you're shipped off to modern-day Spain to fight against the Carthaginians in the Second Punic War. And you're given a wide variety of sort of events or narrative-driven events that occur during your time as a soldier, and you kind of have to balance training. You have to balance, are you going to focus on swordsmanship, on your javelin? Are you going to focus on building your relationship with your fellow comrades, other soldiers in the Roman army? And then when you're presented with these different choices in the war, that can influence the path that you go down. Do you want to basically break away from your soldiers and go loot part of the city, or do you want to, be a hero and try and help your officer as he tries to, drive back the enemy? All of these types of decisions are put at your disposal, and frankly, it's a game that I think does a good job of showing you probably don't want to try and be a hero if you're fighting in a war where you don't get to respawn. If you want to be a hero, you can go for it, but you're probably going to die. And that's probably pretty accurate to how soldiers, fight in the real world. The heroes or the wannabe heroes often don't survive their efforts. But it's a great game. It's available on Steam. I think it's only $9, so it's pretty affordable. I think it has 3 different campaigns, and I really think the world of this game, and I had a lot of fun playing it this year.
I have to say that's a great pick. It would definitely make my honorable mentions. And I think you summed up the game very well. It does penalize hero-type stuff until you get very good at the game. Or if you've played it for a lot, you kind of build up enough points that you can start with a better character. So,
yeah, that's the one thing. So this game can be very, very difficult. One of the things I think they do a good job of that helps you lessen the difficulty a little bit is you earn points based off your previous playthroughs, and those can be used to give you a slight starting advantage when you go into your next game. So you might be able to start off with a better sword or more money or other things that can really help you in the early campaign, kind of snowball yourself into a superhero. Although I have never beaten the game. I always find myself somehow getting myself killed. There was one period where I did something heroic. I won a bunch of awards. I really was very highly leveled up. And then I did something stupid in the North African campaign and rapidly found myself, despite the fact that I was a tremendous soldier, in a situation where it was like 4-on-1 and I got myself killed.
Reminds me, I'm looking at the map right now. It reminds me of old like Nintendo game where you're like this warrior that goes out into the world in this 2D kind of like box hex game kind of thing.
That's not really the gameplay map per se. That is something that comes up occasionally when you're back at camp. You're given orders to like go forage for stuff, and that is a map that comes up when you're out foraging for different materials and minerals. The bulk of this game is text-based, and then I don't know how to describe it, but basically it's
it's almost like a JRPG.
Yeah, that's a good description of it. But basically, you're given choices of like, do you want to aim for the neck? Do you want to aim for the shield or other things like that when you're in combat? The screen you're looking at is not the screen you look at for the majority of the game.
I see. It has like a nice marble background, kind of all text based. Yeah, interesting.
By the way, the storytelling is really good on that too. It's very well written. I think it's pretty historical in terms of the following of the Second Punic War campaigns, and it puts you, in a narrative-driven text adventure as an individual soldier going through all of these things. I think they really did their research, or the guy really did his research. But that's enough on that game. I don't want to spend all the time talking about a number 3 game on the list. So, what's your number 3, Jean?
It's one that you're gonna love, Matt. It's something that's going to win your heart over, and you're gonna be like, "That's exactly what I should have chosen." And my number 3 game of 2019 is drumroll, Axis and Allies 1942 Online.
Wow.
So let it come.
Well,
I
I'm
don't-
just surprised. I
don't
thought I was gonna hate your
understand.
list
Is this-
for other reasons, but
Is this so? I have a question, John. Did I misunderstand? Are we doing the worst 3 games of 2019?
Motherfucker.
you used that joke too early because I think we could use that after he's delivered all 3.
So I knew it was coming because we had a little confrontation on social media about it. So I will say the reason why I've chosen this game as my number 3 of 2019, and the reason being is I always wanted an Axis and Allies game for the PC, laptop, tablet, whatever. Right? I always wanted a digitized version of Axis and Allies. The last 2 iterations that we had, which were back in the 2000s and before, were complete garbage. I mean, you can shit out a better product than that. This game, now, mind you, I know we all played it, I believe, the first week it came out, and I know you guys mentioned, like, there's some lag, and that's mainly because it was designed to be played asynchronously, not synchronously across, all of us as we were playing a multiplayer session. But they fixed all those bugs, and they improved the game leaps and bounds. And when I started playing the game with all of you guys during that multiplayer session, it was an early access game. It was not even version 1.0. It was kind of like beta. So I took it as that. And based upon the game and playing it with you guys and playing the AI and just having my, time with it, I really like it. I really love it, actually, honestly, because it scratches that itch that I wanted to scratch for quite a while, right? It's kind of like, you're trying to grab the back of your back and like that motherfucking itch, I can't get it. And then that one day you find a little paddle and you get that nice little scratch off, and that's what Axis and Allies has done. I can now play this game whenever and wherever I want. And that was the key thing because I haven't played Axis and Allies since the 90s, maybe early 2000s. Since then, we all, my board game crew have all, been busy. One went deployed overseas. Either I was on active duty, my other buddy, went to a games convention. So we never had time to get all together and just play Axis and Allies. And now I don't have to worry about that. Now I can say, hey, Artie, get on this game. Play your turn. I'll play my turn tomorrow, and then Bob will play the next day, and we'll get a game going without even being in the same state. So I think that's pretty awesome, and I appreciate that Beamdog did a great job. And now that I can play my favorite board game, right, and it's one of my favorite board games, I would say it's at least in my top 3 favorite board games, anytime and anywhere.
Well, I mean, I respect the fact that you must really like Axis and Allies, and they've done a pretty faithful representation of it. I can agree with all that. So, I mean, it's not a game which touched me in the same way, but it makes sense that if you were really looking forward to, it's more like a beer and pretzels type tabletop.
Oh yeah,
and now you can play it with people, so it makes sense.
This game for me, because like when me and my friends were, growing up, right, we played Risk, which was, it's a casual strategy game. If you can call it a strategy game, it's very casual. This one takes it up a notch, right? So like this is a little bit more strategy oriented. It's a little bit more, I'm not gonna say grognard, but it requires a little bit more depth, a little bit more thinking, a little bit more strategy than Risk. And this was one of the first games that I played. I was like, shit, I really like strategy games, like games that, you have to kind of make alliances and, attack here and do island hopping, all this shit. And then from Access and Analyze, that's when I started playing other board games and going into digital strategy games. So it was kind of like my jumping off game, I would say. So we got the first 3 out of the way, right? Now we'll head to the top number 2 game of 2019, right? So let's rewind back and let's touch base with Eric here. So I'm curious.
Oh, we're not going to snake. We're not going to go forward, backward.
I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can handle another one of Jean.
Yeah, let's go back to the regular.
All right,
so
number 2.
I'm kind of curious because I thought number 2 or number 1 would be was going to be a last game, but so I'm curious what number 2 on you.
I mean, Field of Glory Empires is good, but in my opinion, there are definitely 2 games which stand out more than that.
Okay.
And I'm actually kind of I kind of have a toss-up for 1 and 2. I put them in a particular order, but they could have even come out in a different order. In fact, I'm even thinking right now, I just put them in this order, but maybe I should reverse them. You know what? I am going to reverse them. So my number 2 game is going to be...
Is this like when you open up the envelope at the awards ceremony and you read the wrong
yeah, exactly.
game?
That never happened before.
That doesn't sound right. Let me change that. It goes to Will Smith instead. My number 2 game is Rule the Waves 2.
Okay.
Huh.
I had a feeling that was coming.
Yeah, I'm not going to give it my number 1, which is where I had it, but thinking about it more, I think the other game I have is more deserving. I have to be honest, I'm not even sure where... I didn't have a list of games in front of me. I didn't look through every game that became available in 2019. So that's part of my dilemma is I just thought about my year and I thought about what did I play a lot of.
You just need to repeat 2019 again, man. Just, go back in time.
I wish. If only I could redo it. No, I mean, and I played A Legionary's Life a lot, so it's funny that I didn't even think about that one, but I don't think it would have made my top 3 had I forgotten about Field of Glory Empires. I should have put that one in number 3 instead, but it's a great game. Anyways, Rule the Waves 2. The reason why it's not number 1, I think Rule the Waves is just a very underrated and underrepresented, not well known enough, underpopular. What's the word I'm looking for here? Not enough people know about it.
Underappreciated.
Yeah, but it's just not even popular. People just don't even know what the game is, and I feel like that's been true since the beginning, and maybe at some point they're going to end up where they should, but I think they're still a little bit too unknown compared to how many people I think would really enjoy this game. I think there's still a large population of people out there who don't know about Rule the Waves who would really like it. And Rule the Waves 2, the reason why it's not my number 1 is because it's basically Rule the Waves 1 extended. There is a huge mechanical difference between 1 and 2 in that there's carriers, there's airplanes. This changes everything. And we know, right? This is how the era of the battleship came to a close, is because of aircraft. So adding all that in is intense. But when you're playing a game and it's the same interface, it's the same battle setup, everything's the same except for it goes longer and new mechanics become available halfway through the game. I mean, by the way, halfway through the game, that's where the old game used to end. If, like my old series on Rule the Waves, they used to take, let's say, 50 hours to complete. The new ones will now take 100 hours to complete because the new game is the old one.
Twice as good.
I wouldn't say twice as good, but it's the old one just plus some stuff at the end where carriers go in. And they have like a mechanic, like a missing shell where missiles are supposed to go. They're supposed to get rocket combat involved. I think they're supposed to have rocket-guided launches from destroyers, stuff like that. But
I can't imagine how that'll work in that game.
I have no idea. It doesn't make any sense. I think that they don't know exactly how it'll work, and it may never even come to fruition. But I love Rule the Waves. It's like how I became even well known on YouTube, just because I did so much Rule the Waves. So that's my game, and there's no way I can not pick Rule the Waves 2 in my top 3.
That's fair, and we did an interview on the show with the developer of the game as well, and that was a lot of fun. I really like Rule the Waves 2. I will admit that when it first came out, I think I was a little bit disappointed that there wasn't enough the experience didn't feel new enough to me.
Yeah.
And I think part of the problem is I always wanted to play from the 1900 start date because I'm a little bit of a completionist, and I don't like the idea of starting the game halfway through the game. I certainly don't like the idea of starting with like legacy battleships or like building a perfect battle fleet in 1925 or 20 or whatever the start date is. So I think I was a little underwhelmed and disappointed with the game, but what I will say is when we did play it a lot for that collaboration series between you, myself, XTRG, and Benjamin Magnus, when I really started, that was the first time I think I really gave the game a fair shake. It wasn't the first time I played it, but it was the first time I really gave it its due. And when we started doing that, man, I remembered every reason that I fell in love with Rule the Waves 1. And Rule the Waves 2 is a really good game. And, you know, it kind of completely makes the purpose of Rule the Waves 1 null and void. There's no reason to go back and ever buy that. But Rule the Waves 2 is excellent, and I agree with you. I've really enjoyed my time with it after a little bit of a delayed appreciation for it.
Yeah, it's one of those, I think, that it has a learning curve. You know, it's not one of those that was easy to get into.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I feel like that's probably what keeps a lot of people from, you know, trying it out is the learning curve. Because I know when I tried it out, I spent some time trying to like get used to the mechanics and how it worked. And, you know, it took longer than a traditional strategy game. So, you know, like for me, like I play John Tiller games. I really like John Tiller games. And those, I'm not going to say like a full grognard, but they're very close, right? There's a lot of stuff in John Tiller games. And I find that even learning a John Tiller game was easier than learning Rule the Waves. There's so many mechanics in there and so many things you got to understand and get into, and then a lot of things you got to need to understand about naval warfare, which is something that I'm interested in, but not, you know, especially not pre-World War II. Like my interest in naval warfare starts around World War II. Anything before then is like, okay, you know, but I really gain interest with naval warfare around, you know, the aircraft carrier, the, you know, Yamato battleship, you know, the Fletcher class destroyers, things around that generation, and then up to modern day. Probably because, you know, my first ship that I ever saw in my life was the Intrepid, which is an SX class carrier. And if you're in New York or traveling to New York, it is, I think, next to 42nd Street. So if you want to see a fucking amazing naval ship, that's where you go. And you can play Rule the Waves on the Intrepid if you bring a laptop. So there.
I think one of the most appealing parts of Rule the Waves, though, is this whole arms race. That's where the game concept comes from.
Well, I mean, I think you're completely right. And I think the fact that, and I don't mean this in a negative way, because I think Ultimate Admiral is going to bring a lot more exposure to the same game concept because of some of their game design choices. But I think the amount of excitement and enthusiasm you see out there for Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts is indicative of the fact that people love the idea of building their own ships and then fighting them, and this arms race concept, which is also going to be built into that game as well.
Well, I can't wait for Rule the Waves 3, where they challenge Ultimate Admiral. It's going to be interesting how that works out.
I don't think they'll ever challenge them from a visual perspective. I mean, you're comparing a full-blown dev studio to a couple of, you know, literally like
one
two
person.
Or three guys. One guy doing all the programming. So
yeah.
I doubt that'll happen. But that's fine. You know, there's different strokes for different folks, as they like to say.
That's right.
With that being said, I think it's my turn to jump into my number 2 game of 2019. And I went back and forth on this a little bit, but I think my number 2 game on this list is going to be Unity of Command 2, which is a sequel, obviously, to Unity of Command 1. It is a turn-based strategy and war game that allows you to play through the Western campaigns of World War II, so 1943, starting in North Africa at the end of the North African campaign, into the invasion of Sicily, Italy, and then eventually the liberation of Europe. And it's a game that I struggled a little bit to kind of understand how all the mechanics work. It's a weird game to me because it's super approachable. Like, you can literally just jump in and play. It is a brilliant mix of sort of beer and pretzels, but also deep strategy and deep sort of wargaming mechanics. So I think in many ways it's the perfect, or one of the better, entry-level war games out there. But there were some things in the game and the user interface that seemed a little bit hidden, a little bit not clear. None of it prevented me from playing through the whole campaign pretty effectively and winning through the campaign. But there were some things in there that I thought could have been done a little bit better. But on the whole, I think it's a really good game. It has some elements of like the Panzer General kind of a mechanic where you have units that gain experience over time, and then you carry those units through the entire campaign, and you can kind of build a shared history, a shared memory with those units, so that, you know, that isn't just an armored unit. That is the armored unit that won the battle of Anzio for you, or whatever it may be. So I think it's a really well done game, and I think the unique thing of the game is that it does supply in a way that I don't think any of these other sort of turn-based strategy games do it, where you have these supply depots that you need to build up or shrink. You need to allocate where you want your supply depots to be located based on the type of terrain the depots are on. They have different amounts of range, and if your troops end up out of supply, they will very rapidly die. And overall, I think it's a game that's a lot of fun. I spent a lot of time playing it, and I really enjoyed it, and it's definitely the number 2 game on my top 3 games of 2019.
I mean, it made a lot of awards. I mean, 91%. Everybody, Wargamer, highly recommended 5 out of 5 by Strategy Gamer. Not to be confused with the Strategy Wargamer.
I mean, I think if if you look at Unity of Command 1, which obviously was the first game in the series, and you know, if you look back to the press around that game, it was amazingly positive, and to this day, I still hear many people refer to that as the best sort of entry-level war game that's ever been made. Unity of Command 2 took a lot of what they did for that game and builds on it. I haven't played the original game, so I'm not as versed in Unity of Command 1. That was a game that looked at the Eastern Front as opposed to the Western Front. But overall, I mean, the whole series has been very well regarded by mainstream outlets, by wargaming outlets, by all of the, whoever you name it, they probably have a positive opinion of Unity of Command as a series.
I have more comments about Unity of Command 2, but I think I'd like to kind of come back to this one after I reveal my number 1 game. So,
oh my God, we know his number 1 game.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed playing this game. This was a really fun game. I had a great time playing it. So, yeah, I could definitely see why everybody gave it top marks. I was considering it for my top 3, but, you know, I chose my top 3 on the games that I always play and the games that are always on my mind all the time. And this was very close to number 3, but did not make the list. Maybe Unity Command 3, but we'll see. All right, so I guess
because it's not on iPad.
Oh man, if it made an iPad, it would definitely turn my head. That's for sure. Or iPhone, so I could play while I'm at work, so nobody can, be like, freaking walk by my desk and be like, what are you up to? I was like, I'm just doing, I'm just checking Slack right here. Don't worry about it. Keep your eyes away, kind of thing.
I will say I disagree with this one thing. When I Googled Unity of Command, there's a section on Google that says games like Unity of Command. And so it's got Unity of Command 2, which makes sense. It's got Panzer Corps 2, Panzer General, which, yeah, okay, I can see a little bit of that. But then it also has Command Modern Air Naval Operations. Which is not even the faintest similar. But anyway, Jean, what's your number 2 game of 2019?
My number 2 is a game that I was looking forward to all year. It was a game that kind of made me wow when I first opened it up, and still, every time I catch the dev blogs or the new patches they come out with, and you can see I'm kind of procrastinating mentioning what it is Imperator Rome. Yes. So I know you guys had some things to say about, and it was kind of like we actually had an episode devoted to Imperator Rome, and we were kind of going back and forth for like 2 hours on this game. And I know I was in the very positive, lot over there while you guys were in the middle or toward the other end. But the reason I love this game and hit my number two was, like I was mentioning, it made me say wow the moment I opened it up. And it was just like little things. As soon as we got up to the map screen, where as I was scrolling from one end to the map to the other, it had that globe effect. And I know, for some people it's like, give me a fucking break. But, I actually ran into one of my friends who mentioned that he really enjoys Imperator Rome. And that was one of the first things that he actually mentioned, because I asked him, like, why do you like that game? And he says, actually, one of the first things that really caught my eye was that globe effect. And then when you go down to the map and how gorgeous and textured that map is, how beautiful it is. And then when you mix all that Paradox strategy awesomeness that they have in every single game with their character system, the character engine that they had in Crusader Kings that they kind of migrated over to this game, it just kind of like surpassed all my expectations. I just thought, honestly, when I started playing Imperator Rome, I was like, oh, this is pretty much just paint the world a single color kind of strategy game. With the paradox flavor though. With a little starburst kind of flavor in there. But as I was trying to take over the world, different countries, I noticed little shit. Like the first time I was going from Macedonia, I declared war against some no nonsense nation, right? And I was sending my dictator over there. And then the game popped up and said, hey, I noticed you go into war. Do you want your wife to kind of run the government? I was like, okay, I guess, whatever. I don't give a shit. So I clicked yes. And then over the next couple of weeks, I've noticed that she was trying to convert the government to more of a religious fundamentalism. And then there were freaking things going on at home between my sons. One killed the other one and started shaking the stability of the government. I mean, while I was fighting armies in the field, I had to deal with shit that was going back out on home. And it was so engrossing and so immersive that I was just like, boom, right there, right then, top game of 2019. So that kind of won me over. And since
Well, second.
well, yeah, top games, I meant. But yeah, so my top second game of 2019. And, since they released it, they released a multitude of updates and patches to address any concerns that people had before with bugs or anything like that. They changed out the population system. They enhanced basically every facet of the game. So from what I understand about the game now, with all these major updates, it's vastly improved from its original launch, which I thought at launch it was a great game. Now it's just so much better. So big props to Paradox for this. I really enjoy it, and it's definitely on my mind. Even though when I still don't play it as much as I should, it's still on my mind. I always think about it in my head while I'm at work. I'm like, fuck, I need to get me a game of Imperator going on, and I probably will soon start a new series on this. So yeah.
Well, Paradox makes great games in general. I think that I haven't given Imperator Rome a fair shake since it's pretty... Well, I mean, a lot of people would say the pretty disastrous release. But yeah, definitely you'd have to give Paradox a lot of credit that they reacted to this. I don't think they expected it. I really don't think that... I'm pretty sure that they thought they were releasing a really top-notch game. And I think there's a little bit of market forces here, people basically voting with their dollar on Paradox DLC policy, which crept into the reviews of the game. Like that or not. I mean, whether you like it or not, I think that's a little bit of what was happening. So I would...
That mana.
Yeah, that's... Some people had, gameplay related reasons to not like it, which I don't know. I don't really know if I dislike the mana concept or not, but it's all... I mean, we're playing a game, so a game's going to have game mechanics. It's unavoidable. Anyway, I just want to say that I respect that as a pick. I don't think it would have been anybody's top. I don't think it should have been at least anybody's top pick when they first released. But, or maybe that's not even fair. Maybe some people, I think, John, you actually really enjoyed it right out of the box, even though a lot of other people, I mean, they did some bug squashing and some quick free DLC releases to get everyone aligned in a little bit more of a positive opinion. it seemed like that all worked out. I, again, haven't really tried it for the last 6 months. I've tried it maybe... I tried it when it first was released, and then maybe once more like a month and a half later after release, and my opinion hadn't changed greatly between those two. But it's still a fun game to me. It's just not, to me, it's just part of the reason why maybe I don't have as high of an opinion of it is because I have such a high bar and like very high opinion, very strong positive opinion of so many other Paradox games like Hearts of Iron. I love that series, and Europa Universalis. So even Victoria 2 is a great. They make such great games that I didn't find any of the same magic in Imperator Rome at launch.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's where we're disagreeing. I thought at launch the opposite, and I feel like ever since they released this game with all the, and honestly, one of the things that I was mentioning on my channel was that they released a 1.1 update and 1.2, and when you think of these like, all right, well, it's a 1.2 update. How good is a 1.2 update? And then you go through the freaking feature list here, and I have the 1.2 Cicero update, and this thing freaking goes on and on and on. I mean, I'm still scrolling literally for like 10, 20 seconds.
John, I don't think that the number of items somebody puts on a change list, I mean, you can be as detailed as you want. You can start saying, I corrected this line of code, I commented this line of code. Anybody... I think, honestly, though, you're right. A lot of things were changed, but I wouldn't quote changelog.
You see here, like, and we're not even talking like, I changed this line of code. It's like reworked experience. Unit experience no longer decays from losses in combat. Then reworked military traditions. Split cities into cities, settlements, metropolises. Settlement is a basic own territorial unit. I mean, added 11 new building types, added 5 new buildings for settlements. Fabricating claim is no longer instant. And then, you just on all republic laws reworked, all monarchy laws reworked, all tribal laws reworked. I mean, this is not a small little thing. This is like, if you're reworking an entire republic law, that shit is going to take, hundreds of lines of code. And that's just one thing right there.
Doing things to do things doesn't actually mean it's a good change, I think.
Well, I don't think they would just do it for the heck of it. They would do it to improve it.
But what that means is, if they felt the need to make all the changes that they made, then clearly, at launch, the game had problems.
I don't think the game had problems at launch. I think people's expectations of the game were... I think what a lot of people wanted was, for $40, they wanted a game that was as deluxe as like Crusader Kings 3 is today, right? Like they wanted a game that was as
Crusader Kings 3?
Yeah, they wanted
access to the game.
I mean, my apologies. I'm sorry. Crusader Kings 3, Crusader Kings 2. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, we don't need to turn this into an argument about Imperator. Obviously,
yeah,
you thought highly about Imperator. I think I didn't hate it, but I wasn't on my list. But I certainly respect this decision of yours more than I respect.
Yeah.
I'm getting on Matt's good side.
I can't wait to hear Jean's number one, though. Speaking of number one.
Is that damning with faint praise? It's like, well, this opinion is good. Your last one still sucked.
Oh,
Moving
man.
on to the number one.
You'd be a great guidance counselor.
2019. Well, let's shift this back over to Tortuga and see what his number one game of 2019 was.
I want to revisit for a brief moment your pick for number 2, which was
your pick for number 1.
No, so that's I actually wanted to compare and contrast Unity of Command with my pick. I wanted to say that I think that actually I don't know if this is represent. I wanted to say, maybe this says something about you as a gamer versus me as a gamer, that we have slightly different tastes. Probably that's not too much of a stretch to say. I think everyone has slightly different tastes. But my pick for the number one game of 2019 is Strategic Command World War I. And I think that that's directly I would say that had Strategic Command World War I not come along, I might have said Unity of Command 2 as like my number 3. And I think the reason why is because everything about Strategic Command World War One is deeper, and to me that's more satisfying. It's more complicated, it takes longer to learn. In fact, the first time I played Strategic Command World War One, I bounced off it. I had to force myself to play it a little bit longer because I really didn't like it. Luckily for me, I was forced to play it longer because I was streaming the game and I wasn't going to be like, okay, this game sucks after like 30 minutes. But after I kind of played it for, it was probably like an hour and a half, 2 hours in that stream, started to pick up a little bit of momentum. The game mechanics to me, by the way, this also comes, I should have, like, full disclosure, I haven't played any of the previous Strategic Command titles. I played Strategic Command, what was the one? World at War, the most recent one?
Oh, yeah.
So I played that one very briefly and I bounced off that as well. So I think part of this is me just saying yes to Strategic Command as a general series, but I also think that Strategic Command World War I is probably the peak of their gaming titles right now. It's probably the best of what they offer. And it took me by surprise, which something that surprises you, which is much better than you expect, probably creates like a psychological effect where you pick it as a better game than maybe it really is, just because you were so surprised that you're so happy with it compared to like I'm kind of saying the same thing opposite of Imperator Rome. Like I was expecting so much more that I'm probably a little bit more negative about it than I otherwise would be if it was a different company making it. So, a Strategic Command World War One. I love it. I know Matt's playing it. He's got a series on it. I got a series on it. It's like I just started recording it and couldn't stop. It was so fun. So, and I think that there's been a lot of decent, and also a lot of not so good World War One games out there. I really think we should
to end all wars.
I was gonna say we should probably do an episode one day about just World War One games. We can, because there's another one. This Supreme Ruler, they have the Great War DLC to their game, and that one's pretty interesting because it adds like geopolitical stuff, which is not really present in Strategic Command World War One. It's almost like a geopolitical simulator with military, but I think the focus is still war game first. Or I don't guess. I'm sure it's war game first, and by definition, by the developers' words, they say this is a war game first, geopolitical sim second. So yeah, but
which is true. I mean, it's a game that like the politics is very much inconsequential for almost all of it. Like I don't even know why they allow you to have diplomatic relations with countries that are hard coded into coming into the war on the side of the other side. Like why am I being allowed to waste my money on something that has no impact except maybe delaying their entry like a month?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they need to rebalance some of the diplomacy stuff. But I'm okay with it just as a game, which is a war game, where like they almost just pick historical time frames for all those kind of things to happen if they just completely abstracted the diplomacy. Because the thing I like most about it is, no surprise, the combat. I think that they have done a really good job, and I also think that their supply mechanic is really good. It took me probably like 20 hours into the game to start appreciating it, and maybe even more than that to like really, really appreciate it, but I think it's extremely clever. And I only noticed this because in my current game, I did a France first push, and I kept, I was very successful in my opening Schlieffen, and I took Paris at some point, and then I started pushing south because I don't know, this doesn't strike me as realistic. There's a lot of things about the game which are not realistic, and I think that people just need to go back to our Single Malt Strategy podcast episode on this. You'll hear first and foremost that naval combat is pretty atrocious, and that's something I stand by, despite the fact that the game is my number one pick. But supply is really interesting. I have this situation where I'm pushing south in France to take their second capital in Bordeaux. I don't think that France... I can't imagine a situation of France not surrendering in my situation where I'm just rolling over them. But that's besides the point. The supply mechanic is really interesting. I actually have to wait for cities to rebuild supply if I attack them too much.
I thought that was cool.
To like stretch your supply. They kind of rejuvenate the supply flow. and it ends up being a very interesting minigame. So what I found is actually I had to slow down my push south, waiting for supply to catch up, which was just I was so floored by that in a positive way. It really worked for me. I felt like, wow, this is cool. Anytime the game catches me off guard, like in this moment where I feel like, wow, this is like real. I can't solve this problem because it's a real problem. I think that's a good thing. So sorry, I may have, yeah.
Spoiler alert, that is my number one pick for 2019.
Well, what, John? Why don't you add anything that you might?
Yeah, that's all I'm gonna. Oh man, we should have done a revert. Now I'm just joking, but no, I completely agree with you. This is my number one game of 2019. And the reason being is I play this game literally nonstop. Like I can't, put in so many hours into this game and just so much work just making art for it, for my YouTube videos and stuff like that. So, and this game is always on my mind, even when I'm not playing it. And that's kind of like a hallmark for me of like a great game. If this game is in my head while I'm not playing it, that's fucking amazing. Something that I always look forward to throughout the day. There's a couple things I really love about the game. The trench system that they have, the technology system, a lot of the key mechanics that they brought for Strategic Command to World at War, they brought over to this game. Those mechanics that I love, that I'm used to. But they added little bits and tidbits here to improve the game, to make it make it more improved. I would say things like the mines. I really like how all of a sudden if I'm sailing out into the open sea, I fucking hit a mine, all this shit, suddenly my ship gets smashed up. So I like that, even though it kind of pisses me off every so often. I do like other things. Their Blue Max mode that they released for the game is, if you do purchase the game, you gotta visit the forums. There's a thread there. It's called the Blue Max mode. You gotta play this with that. And the reason I say that is, if you play Strategic Command World War One, it's kind of like, and I use the analogy in one of my videos, it's kind of like buying a Ford Mustang, right? But without a paint job. It looks great. The design looks nice. It can go from 0 to 60 in 2 seconds. But adding this mode, which changes all the tokens and redoes the map and just basically makes everything look sexy and pretty, right? It's like putting fire red on that Ford Mustang. It's just like, oh shit, this is beautiful. So yeah, you definitely want to pick up this Blue Max mode. It's free, of course, so you can easily pick it up. But key things that I really liked about the game is the new mechanics that they added in, like the mines and stuff like that, the trench system. I do like that I can actually play a World War One game, right, without going full grognard on that. Right. And what I mean by this is, like, normally when I want to play a World War II game, I used to pick up Heart to Iron and then have to devote months, if not a year, into the game. Here, I can pick up a World War One game, and instead of, spending, a long time with, months and stuff like that, I can actually finish the game in, a few weeks, if not sooner, depending on how fast I want to get through the game. So, other things I really liked about this game, the decision system, something I really like about this game. It adds a little bit of variety. You can kind of branch the game off from the vanilla kind of historical version. Really like that. Like the weather effects, especially with the Blue Max mode, looks really good. I do also like the fact that when you start the game off, air power is shit, right? Like, you got planes flying in the sky and you're like, oh man, these things are fucking worthless. But the allies who I'm actually fighting against, they put a lot of research into air power. And now I see it late in 1917, how effective this can be. And especially with artillery. Earlier in the game, I was like, people are shooting off artillery, and it was just like, I could throw a rock and it would have better use, right? Now, in 1917, years into the game, with research, right, the freaking allies are tearing me a new asshole, right, where I'm losing entire cores even before they begin an attack. So little things like that they added into this game. And like you were saying, the supply mechanics, I really have a great appreciation for. The one thing that I'll leave off with this game that I would love the developer to add, and it's not like a con or anything like that, but it's a wish list thing. I would like the ability in this game to raise cities to the fucking ground. And the reason why I will tell you guys this is because I moved my entire army west to deal with the Allies. I signed a peace treaty with Russia, but then I got these little towns like in Serbia or Montenegro that kind of rise up with partisans and piss me off. And I think, Serbia, right, Belgrade, revolted twice. And, after the second time, I want to just send in a corps there and just raze the town to the ground. So, if I could just add one thing to the developer, please let me raise the bloody town to the ground. But yeah, that's my piece on the game.
Now, did you realize, John, that you can hit P to bring up the partisans map mode?
No. What you hit T to bring up the partisan map mode?
If you hit P, it will show you where on the map partisans can rise up, and if you leave those areas ungarrisoned, then partisan units will rise.
That's
okay. So basically, you just have to leave garrisons there.
Oh, okay, interesting. All right, I did not.
There's places like that in Russia also.
Yeah, I've noticed that Minsk did that to me. So Slomensk and Minsk. So
we'll keep doing that to you unless you leave those areas garrisoned.
Yeah, but, especially when you're low on troops, I need everybody I can get, so.
And that gives you the realistic limitations of the war, because they're definitely needed. You couldn't just, advance and not leave garrison troops behind in certain parts of Europe. With that being said, I guess that leaves it up to me for my number one game of 2019.
Drum roll!
Wait, did you... Okay, no, just go ahead.
Strategic Command World War I.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Oh shit, we all have the top number one. Holy shit.
That's pretty remarkable.
So yeah.
That's the first time that ever happened.
That was slightly different for my YouTube channel, and I had things reordered a little bit. But
what did you do on your YouTube channel? I was going to ask you that, because I thought I saw it.
So I moved a few things around. In my YouTube channel, I had Legionary's Life as number 4. And I had Strategic Command as number 3, and Unity of Command was actually my number 1. But I will say that my appreciation for Strategic Command has been growing over time, and I actually think a little bit more highly of it now than I did before. The one game that I did leave off my top 3 here that was actually in my top 3 in my other list was Command Modern Operations.
Oh, yeah.
And that's because I wanted to talk about a Legionary's Life. I did my list on my channel as a top 5. But if we were doing it just as a top 3, I think I would have rated a Legionary's Life a little bit more highly, because I really do think, just from a pure gameplay perspective, I don't know if it's really top 3, but from a one guy did this thing and the experience is phenomenal and I loved it and I wanted to talk about it. That's why it made it into my top 3. But I would also probably put Strategic Command World War I above Command Modern Operations right now. So hence my ordering. That being said, I guess if I was going to talk about another game, I do think another game that could be my number 1 on the list would be Command Modern Operations, and that is the sequel to Command Modern Air Naval Operations, which is developed by Warfare Sims and is published by Matrix and Slytherin Games. And it is a spiritual successor to the Harpoon series. It's a newer version of their previous game, and it is, if you were to say, hey, I want to build a really complex computer simulation to simulate hypothetical wars, and it's not actually a computer game. That would kind of be what the idea is behind Command Modern Operation. It is a simulation more than it is a game. They reworked the user interface to make it a little bit more approachable. I think they definitely made some enhancements to the map and the way you can scroll around a lot more seamlessly, a lot more fluidly. I think they made a lot of just sort of basic quality of life improvements. I think the real big thing with this game is I've seen criticism about this, but they added integration with TAC View, which is a program that a lot of flight simmers use to kind of rewatch their dogfights in 3D. Well, with the integration they built with TAC View, they actually are able to output your command battles to TAC View in real time while you're playing it. So command itself is a 2D interface, again, very similar to Harpoon, but they output it into a 3D world, which is not like super high. You don't have like paint or things like that. It doesn't look like real life. It's kind of, hey, this is a red jet. It looks like the real jet, but it's just a solid red color, or it's a blue color, or whatever. But it is nice to see in a 3D environment planes crisscrossing through the sky, dogfighting, and doing all these other things. They made a lot of enhancements to the game. They completely reworked the way that dogfighting works. They really put a lot of effort into modeling G-forces on the actual operators of the aircraft. And then, and by the way, so the TacView thing, you have to buy TacView separately. If you want that, it's an optional add-on. You buy it through the TacView company, not through Warfare Sims. But overall, I think they did a really good job with this game, and I think I think one of the most impressive things they did with this game, and this is going to sound weird, because it's not specifically about the actual gameplay. They had, I want to say, like a dozen DLC packs with Command Modern Air Naval Operations, and when they updated the game and released this sequel, they ensured that all of their previous scenarios will work in the new game. And so if you bought any DLC for the previous version of the game, guess what? That all works in the new game. If you are, one of the many hundreds of people that are out there building literally thousands of user-created scenarios out there, all of those scenarios you made in your previous version of the game will work in the new game. Now, you might need to rebalance some things because, again, a lot of the combat stuff was enhanced and modified. But overall, I just think that's an incredibly pro-consumer approach to things, and I was really stunned to see them do that, because you pretty much never see game developers do things like that. Like, could you imagine Crusader Kings 3 coming out and all the Crusader Kings DLC for Crusader Kings 2 would work?
Wow.
Because I can't. That's basically what they did.
So the Arena Matrix, though, has been a lot of pretty much most of all their games come with a scenario editor, though. I mean, like Strategic Command.
Well, and this does too.
Yeah, so I mean, pretty much all their games come out with a scenario editor. So that's one thing I really love about that publisher. But yeah, I totally agree with you on Paradox. It would be really great if they did something like that.
I mean, the best way. I don't think it's the games are, the scenarios are coded in, I think, in Lua, and so, or the scenarios are coded in Lua. You can script your scenarios in Lua, so it makes it very easy to transfer them over to the new game because it uses the same, I guess, language. I don't think, I'm assuming with all the massive underpinning changes that they're making with CK3, I don't even think they could do that if they wanted to do it. But that doesn't mean I still definitely appreciate them for doing that in Command Modern Operations. If you can do it relatively simply, I think it just shows a lot of support and appreciation for their followers. And I don't know if I've done a great job of describing what this game is. If you ever wanted a sandbox where you could literally build any hypothetical conflict between thousands of different aircraft and thousands of different military systems, and you just wanted to kind of create scenarios in this sandbox and fight them against each other, you can do that in this game. And so that's, I think, one of its big appeals. I think Rule the Waves' appeal is, hey, it's a sandbox scenario, shipbuilder. This is a sandbox war builder where you can, build any sort of hypothetical conflict that you really want to. The one weakness in the game really continues to be land combat. They made some enhancements there, but it's still not, if you're looking for a game that's primarily about land combat and blitzkrieg across Europe in World War III, you probably want to look at like Flashpoint campaigns or something like that instead. But overall, this game is my number one game of the year because I think a ton about it. I think it's really good, and I think very strongly about Strategic Command as well. But this would be my number one game of 2019.
So I think it's pretty cool that we all agreed on the same game, which people are not going to believe this, but we did not at all plan.
Yeah, I didn't plan that.
I think it sounded pretty convincing. Hey, you did a good job, John. You totally sold it.
Dude, I had no idea that was your number one game. I thought you were going to come out with some, no offense, obscure game. I was like, I don't know nothing about that game.
Listen, Tortuga, you can say that it was spontaneous, but let's be real. We got our video surveillance team. We were making bull moose noises. We were letting people know what pitch was coming so we could crush that homer out of the park.
I have no idea what the fuck you just said.
None of you guys are following the sign stealing shit going on in Major League Baseball right now?
Oh, I saw something vaguely in the news, but I did not.
I'm basketball and football kind of guy.
It is
baseball.
Kind of.
I know your Twitter feed's been lighting up with stuff like that.
It is a big deal.
I did want to talk about a few other games that were apparently. I mean, I didn't really.
Honorable mentions.
We have the kind of weird situation now where I only wanted to pick from games which were released in 2019. Or really, I guess I was originally going based on that, and then I thought maybe I should just pick the games I liked the most in 2019, even if they were 20 years old. I don't know what the best way of doing it is. Maybe it is supposed to be only the games in 2019, so that people, listen to us and they say, oh, okay, those are new games that I haven't checked out yet. However, with the early access, this whole thing where people basically don't release a game, but you've been playing it for like 6 years, it's a little bit weird to suddenly put it on your 2019 best games, even if it should have been there like 4 years ago.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I mean, so that's the other difficult thing with like a game like Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts. Like that game would definitely be in my list if the campaign was out. But I think the reason I didn't put it in my campaign is not because it's not in early access, but because I haven't gotten to play the part of the game that I think is the most important part to me. So I don't want to rate it as a top game until I actually interact with the mechanic in the game that is the most meaningful to me.
Yeah, I think it'll be a top game whenever it is released. So I don't know if we're supposed to do it based on release date, but technically there is at least one game which I really love, and I would at least say that I'm going to mention it here, is They Are Billions. It's a great strategy game if you like it's kind of like a mix-up between Age of Empires and Caesar or Pharaoh, those old city building games. It's a survival type game in the sense that you are building a city. Most of the objectives are to get to a certain population, but all the while zombies are spawning around you. It's a zombie-based game. The lore is zombies, and you have zombies attacking you, so you have to build up walls. And I think the defensive system in that game is really amazing. I highly recommend anyone who hasn't heard of it and may be interested in like something like a Pharaoh mixed with an Age of Empires. If that sounds interesting to you, I definitely recommend that you check out They Are Billions.
Is it more of like is it kind of like Stronghold, but with zombies instead of like actual soldiers?
Yeah, you could say it that way. It's not Stronghold. I mean, it's not PvP. It's not against the AI. The only way to play it is with like this spawning zombie mechanic, at least as far as I know. I mean, if you play the campaign, there are some story missions where you go on, in strategy games, especially like the old Warcraft games, like Warcraft 1, Warcraft 2, you had maps where you build, and then you had maps where you had a fixed number of units you start out with. They have some of those fixed number of units where you just have to clear the map very carefully. I don't think that's everyone's favorite type of map, but anyway, they have that in the campaign if you're interested, and the campaign has this system where you slowly research different topics to improve your cities. Like, okay, I'm going to have this resource gathered 10% faster. That's a research thing I picked after maybe the first mission, and then it applies for the rest of the campaign. All those kind of things, that just, it ticks so many boxes for me. I really enjoy it. So that's I don't know if it's a strategy game. It's not the kind of strategy game that we usually talk about on this podcast, but I think it's worthwhile mentioning because technically it was released, even though it's been in early access. I've been playing it for like 3 years.
Yeah, I don't have any issue with including games from previous years. I've even, at least on my channel, when I do my top 5 lists, I will often say like, basically these are the 5 games I played the most during this year, and whether it came out this year or it came out like at the end of 2017, it was my top game for that year. So it doesn't, that's sort of my logic. But yeah, I know people are topical and they want what's new. So sometimes you'll get some,
which makes sense.
I do think that They Are Billions, I haven't played it, although I do have it. It's one of those games that was like Steam sailed, and I was like, I've seen such great positive reviews about this thing. I should really check it out, and it's cheap, and so I buy it, and then I haven't actually played it. But I will say They Are Billions, for whatever reason, in my mind, when I think of that, I also think of Frostpunk? Which are, like, they kind of came out or started coming out, I think, around the same time, and they seem like they have similar mechanics and ideas. One, you're surviving against zombies; the other, you're surviving against like the elements. But it's still kind of they have a very similar vibe and sort of aesthetic, and I think they came out around the same time.
Yeah, a bit different just because one is... I agree that essentially both of them are similar because they both have strong city building elements. But it's a little bit different just that they're billions. You have active things on the map trying to kill you. You have to create an army like while you're doing the city building. So that's why it feels a little bit like Caesar or Pharaoh or Age of Empires, I guess it's also where you have to like expand, move your army there first to clear out an area, and then you can expand. With Frostpunk, it was, I guess, a little bit similar in that you had to expand your heat camps, which are basically like power cells to allow you to expand. I don't know. Yeah, but I haven't played Frostpunk, so I can't... I've watched other people play it, but I otherwise can't speak to it. Should we have been mentioning any DLC? That's another thing which I didn't mention any DLC which came out, but I was, I could have. Like Armored Brigade had a lot of good DLC which came out. I'd like to say that Armored Brigade was another runner-up for me.
I mean, it's up to you. I mean, if you want to make an honorable mention, the reason why I just made, the way I kind of took Best Games of 2019 as like a full or early access game that kind of released. I was going to add DLCs to mine, but like when I think of game and like Best Game of 2019, I always think of a full game that came out. The DLCs are nice. They're add like components to the game, but I feel like it's not the full, like, you can't just buy DLC and just play it by itself. You have to buy the game and the DLC.
Okay, fair. I agree. So I'll still mention Armored Brigade. That's another game I was playing. I had a lot of fun with.
Yeah, that was an incredible
game. Some years I feel like DLC could almost have its own top 5 DLC of the year. I didn't feel like there was that much interesting DLC this year, although Armored Brigade definitely had some. But generally speaking, it felt like a little bit of a down year for DLC that was compelling and interesting to me to play anyway.
BSG, Battlestar Galactica Deadlock had some good ones.
Oh yeah, I always forget about that game. I barely played it. Anyway.
Year of 2020 is upon us, and our next episode, guys, for episode number 50, we've hit 50. Can you believe it? So, episode 50, we're going to be going into our top anticipated games of 2020, and it's going to be a great list, at least from my end. I already released a video on it, so if you guys want a little spoiler, you can go in there, but I'm sure Matt's already talked about his, and I don't know, Tortuga, did you release yours?
Oh, I haven't gone into these 2019, 2020 videos.
Oh, okay.
I keep it just exclusive to the Single Malt Strategy podcast.
Oh, okay. We have him on the contract, people. All right, so we'll save that for the next episode, which hopefully we can get out by either probably next week or the week after, but that does...
Can I come to one of your places to record it? Because I'm pretty sure that I will have sold my home so that I can afford buying a 50-year-old bottle of scotch to celebrate episode number.
Not selling his home to buy a bottle of scotch. That's the way I like it.
Well, the only way I can afford a 50-year-old bottle of scotch is by selling my house. Let's be real. So
it's only reasonable.
I got an air mattress.
Are you going to make me play Axis and Allies by Beamdog? Because if you are, I'm not coming.
Oh, man. Weren't you guys, like, for the holiday season, weren't you guys, like, within the same state? Like, you guys probably could have, like, ran into each other.
I mean, Illinois is a big state. It's like...
We were only 6 hours away from each other.
It's like, oh, we were only 400 miles apart.
Usually when you see Illinois, it's like this little, small, little, quaint little state. No offense to y'all in Illinois, but,
I have no idea what map you're looking at, but I think you failed geometry.
Honestly, I just pay attention to the East Coast and sometimes the West Coast, and, I know that...
Coasty.
If it's not by D.C., New York City, or Philly, I don't know. No, I'm joking. But we will catch you guys in the next episode. We hope you guys enjoyed this, and we'll catch you next time. See you then.
Bye.
Bye.